The PTR for Phase 4 of Season of Discovery has seen an absolutely enormous amount of class changes. Originally, I wanted to cover everything, but there's simply so many that I don't think I'd be able to get through them in any reasonable amount of time. Of course, this is all still on the PTR too, so things are very liable to change. But what I thought I'd do today is try and pick out 3 of the most exciting and interesting class changes which we currently know about. These will be the things that'll make you think, actually that sounds kind of interesting, maybe I do want to try this out. Anyways, we've plenty to get through today, so let's make a start. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a platform dedicated to teaching back-end web development from start to finish in the Python and Go programming languages. It keeps things interesting and fresh by treating this learning experience as if it were an RPG, where you're in charge of the pace that the action happens. It has achievements, leaderboards, daily goals, and much more. And above all, Boot.dev wants to get you hands-on writing and understanding your own code, as it's such an effective way to learn their content. There is plenty of help available for your learning journey too. Boot has an AI tool that will help you understand what you are learning rather than just handing you the answers if you are stuck. Boot.dev believes that getting a solid understanding of the fundamentals and taking your time is key in this field of work. And if this proves to be something for you, positions are well paid and they often have remote working opportunities too. So why not check them out today? You can click the link in the description box and use my code WillE to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% your first month or year, depending on the subscription that you choose. Many thanks to Boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. We'll begin with Priest. One of the new runes they're getting is Vampiric Touch. This works in a very similar way to what it did in TBC, where it's a damage over time effect, which will also restore mana to your party based off your damage dealt. Now the mana restoration is a bit lower than it was in TBC, but comparatively, Shadow Priest should be doing more damage, so I think it will be quite competitive. Another interesting new side effect of this rune is that when you have the Vampiric Embrace ability talented, Vampiric Touch will automatically apply it. This is just going to save you a global and ensure this powerful debuff is always running. So your Shadow Priest is really not just going to be a mana battery anymore, but a mana and health battery. The most exciting change I think Shadow's getting this phase is that the Pain and Suffering rune has been completely reworked. Now it will make your filler spells, such as Mind Spike, refresh your damage over time effect on the target, which has the shortest duration left. So this is going to make your rotation into snapshot your dots at the start of the fight, spam Mind Spike, and then Mind Blast off of cooldown. So as it's looking at the moment, it kind of is a 2-button rotation once you have your damage over time effects running, but with dots being able to crit, and you not having to worry about refreshing them, it will hopefully put Shadow Priest a bit more on the damage meters. Discipline gets Soul Warding, which will make Power Word Shield spam way more of a viable healing option in PvE, and it could very much help out if there's any mechanics which can nearly one-shot people, or in those clutch moments where someone needs an instant heal that there doesn't tend to be too many of in vanilla. Also, this will give your priests a reason to go down the discipline tree a bit more for some of that utility such as power infusion. For warlocks, Blizzard are having yet another go at making affliction into a thing. It hasn't worked yet. Will it in this patch? Well, maybe, because Soul Siphon will now increase drained soul damage by up to 300% on targets below 20% health. This really depends on how much health bosses have. Execute phases already tend to be very fast in vanilla, and Drain Soul doesn't exactly do its damage very quickly. I have 2 changes for destruction which are worth a mention. One of them is a pretty short one. It's that Backdraft now has a 15-second duration up from 10 seconds. This means if you're using Conflagrate on cooldown, you have a permanent 30% haste buff. As we stand at the moment though, Conflag still does consume Immolate, so you're going to need to refresh that. Speaking of execute runes though, Warlocks also have a new one for destruction called Decimation. This reduces the cast time of Soulfire on targets below 35% health by 40% and makes it so the spell doesn't cost a shard anymore. This is the same as the Wrath version that was in the Demonology tree, but for Season of Discovery this is going to be much better for destruction builds. And the Lake of Fire rework is here as expected, and happened after it got completely gutted at the start of Phase 2, now it makes Rain of Fire instant cast and non-channeled but has an 8-second cooldown. A bit of an optional AoE talent. In practice, you'll just throw down Rain of Fire, run into the enemies and cast Hellfire afterwards. Also, Lake of Fire no longer has any fire damage amplification either. For mages, one of their new runes is Overheat, and this is probably the best rune of the phase. This really smooths out hot streak gameplay. It will make it so Fire Blast always crits and can be cast whilst casting another spell. So imagine you're spamming Fireball or Frost Firebolt, whichever one, you get one crit, and instead of just having to hope your next one crits, you can Fire Blast during that Fireball cast and then instant Pyroblast afterwards. And maybe if you're lucky, you get another hot streak off of that. This rune is a talent that was introduced later in World of Warcraft and is just such a big deal for fire mages. Another new rune is Frozen Orb. This sends a Frozen Orb forwards that does damage and slows enemies which are hit. This is doing very high damage at the moment. I want to say it's overtuned, but we still are in the PTR of course. It also procs Frost talents such as Frostbite and improves slowing effects. This is very powerful when paired with Living Flame on AoE or gold farming and so on and so forth. I think mages are going to remain the kings of AoE with this one. And your Advanced Warding rune, which was already in the game, has been buffed heavily. It makes it so Frost and Fire Wards absorb 100% more damage and Mana Shield drains 50% less mana. But the changes are now, these spells can all be cast on allies as well. Also, your Remove Curse is upgraded into Remove Greater Curse, which means mages will be able to dispel curses as well as a magic effect at the same time. This is just some incredible utility. I don't really know if this is better in PvE or PvP, but good mages are going to get a lot of use out of this. For rogues, they've been having AoE problems this entire season, so in this final phase, Blizzard said, you know what, you can have all the AoE now. Shuriken Toss has been reworked and it's now on a 30-second cooldown, but generates 1 combo point per target hit. So if you're hitting 5 targets, that's 5 combo points on a 30-second cooldown guaranteed, which is pretty amazing. Rogues also get a bunch of new poisons, which do things such as reducing enemies' armor, attack speed, and so on. One of the new poisons is called Occult Poison, which does the same as what Deadly Poison does, but now also increases magical damage against the target by 10% as well. And you're also getting Fan of Knives. It's kind of like Shuriken Toss's big brother, which you could have expected to get in Phase 2. This will simply, as it has done since Wrath, do damage to all nearby targets, and will apply poisons as well, albeit it seems to be at quite a low rate at the moment. What is worth a mention is that we have Fan of Knives and focused attacks, and if you played Rogue in early Wrath of the Lich King, you'll know people went and farmed Fell Striker, a dagger which has a chance to give you a proc to make you have a 100% critical strike chance. And then between hitting every target with Fan of Knives and focused attacks restoring energy, you could go into a feedback loop of press Fan, everything crits, focused attacks restores all your energy, press Fan again, and rogues could do some pretty insane AoE then. For druids, Alun's Fires will now refresh Moonkin's dots to their full duration. Pretty similar to what we've already seen for priest, so you'll be applying your Sunfire and your Moonfire early on, and then you Wrath or Starfire to just keep those debuffs rolling. Moonkin form will also give 2 spell power per level, so we're looking at 120 spell power for free at level 60. On top of that, Moonkin form will allow Insect Swarm, Moonfire and Sunfire's damage over time effects to crit. So a lot of buffs for the boomies here. Feral gets some very good AoE through their new back rune, Improved Swipe. This will make your bear form swipe hit up to 10 targets. All tanks have had this change, by the way, where one of their AoEs will hit up to 10 targets, such as Shadow Cleave for Warlock, Thunderclap for Warrior, and so on. And cat form will have a swipe too, which is the same version as it was in Wrath. You simply swipe and hit all nearby targets for very high damage. And if you're Restoration, well, I hope you like being a tree, because you're going to be a tree in Phase 4, just as you were throughout TBC and throughout Wrath of the Lich King, because Tree of Life is back. It gives tons of bonus healing, bonus spirit, and mana cost reductions. You're definitely going to be using this, so I would make sure you don't get too attached to your normal appearance. Shaman have Storm, Earth, and Lightning as one of their new runes, which lowers the cooldown on Chain Lightning, makes Earthbind apply a root, and further increases the damage over time effect of Flame Shock by 60%. This is a very strong rune that just does a lot of different things. things. For Elemental especially, when you pair it up with existing runes such as Overload, Burn and Power Surge, you're going to be expecting a lot of Flame Shock damage and Lava Burst procs. Blizzard are also having another go at making two-handed enhancer thing, well, kind of anyway. They've buffed two-hand spec to now give 50% attack speed up from 30%, and they say it will also generate far more Maelstrom weapon stacks. Is it gonna beat dual wield? Probably not, but we can have another go with it at least. And finally for Shaman, all max rank weapon imbues will now last 60 minutes. I don't know why it just has to be max rank instead of weapon imbues in general, but hey, there you go. For Hunter, Heart of the Lion is no longer something you need to waste a rune slot on, and will be a baseline ability. The kill command rune is also gone and has been replaced with Kill Shot, which is an instant attack which deals high damage, not purely an execute, as it can be used on any health target. However, its cooldown is refreshed when used on a target below 20% health. Blizzard are also trying to make a melee weave spec into a thing in the survival tree. Interesting, but I don't know if it's going to be other options. One of the key new runes for this build is Wyvern Strike, which has replaced Invigoration, and this needs Wyvern Sting to be talented to be usable, which is of course the final talent in the survival tree. Chimera Shot will also refresh the cooldown on Wyvern Strike. So basically you're doing this thing where you're running into melee, pressing Wyvern Strike, running out and then pressing Chimera Shot to refresh the cooldown and then running back into melee. In practice it does sound like a lot of fun, we'll see how it ends up playing though. Hunter's TNT rune now makes Fire Trap scale with melee attack power. Remember, melee, not ranged. And they hit pretty hard now as well, especially explosive on AoE. I have to say for the melee weaving spec I just went over, you can't get Trap Launcher, which means no traps in combat, which does feel a bit clunky. Trap weaving when you run into melee feels like such a natural thing to do, but maybe this will change before the PTR is over. Paladin is the most changed class in Phase 4. You could do a whole video on everything that's changed, but I'm just going to give you a brief overview here. So the Exorcist rune is now a baseline ability, Seal of Martyrdom, that's a baseline ability, and Avenging Wrath, aka Wings, that will also be a baseline ability, and they will be learned through skill books. Holy Paladin seems like it's going to be in a great spot in Phase 4. I think they've been the most buffed healer. One of the biggest changes they've seen is the infusion of Light Rune. It now makes Holy Shock do 50% bonus heals and damage, have a 6-second cooldown, and refund its cost, as well as resetting its cooldown when it crits. And for more melee focused paladins, the Vindication rune. This makes it so when the talent of the same name in the ret tree procs, it will give the paladin a massive bonus 15% attack power, agility, and strength, as well as reducing the target's attack power by a bit. This is just a lot of stats for free, and I think is going to be pretty hard to beat out by other rune options. Finally, Warrior. One of their new runes is Sudden Death, which makes it so attacks have a 10% chance to make your next execute usable, regardless of the target's health, and you will keep 10 rage. Now the classic version of execute is very powerful as it scales its damage with your rage spent, so this should be some fairly large extra hits now and again, especially when you're at that stage where you're constantly rage capping due to world buffs and how much crit you'll have. Speaking of crit, Wreck is now on a 5-minute cooldown and will give 50% bonus crit, so this is going to be up a lot more often in raids. And honestly, with world buffs and consumables, you're probably going to be somewhere around 35% crit already, so I reckon in the long run this is going to prove to be a buff for the Warrior. Finally, Warriors are getting a very experimental new ability which will be learned through a skill book called Valor of Azeroth. Why get world buffs when you can be the world buff? That's what this ability is. It makes it so the Warrior can apply a weaker version of Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer to their entire raid. The function of this is to smooth out the content a bit if you're in a guild that's wiping a lot and you're feeling as though you're missing world buffs to really be able to continue pushing the content. Also, as a side note, Warriors get to run around with Dragon Slayer light all the time, so hey, that's pretty cool as well, right? But that's it, 3 of the changes I have for each class from the Phase 4 Season of Discovery PTR at the moment. So let me know what your thoughts are, whether you're wanting to try any of these out in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.